Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another sellout chamber lunch. Personally, it's quite a relief, given it's my first in the tenure as president, and I'll hope we'll have a similar attendance at my final lunch, albeit nearly 3 years away. It has been some 121 days, I'm not counting, since Jennifer announced at the May lunch I would be taking over as the 40th post-war president of the chamber. During this time, we've managed to recruit a new honorary treasurer, and I'm delighted to share Tim Barnes, the finance director of Jersey Post, has taken on this role. And this post, along with our new vice president, Daphne East, completes our operational committee, the House Committee, and I look forward to working with you both. I'd like to formally welcome Tim and Daphne to their roles, and also I look forward to working with all of the sector committee members and their respective committee members. I have some very large, albeit more fashionable shoes to fill as I take over from Jennifer Carnegie. As Jennifer quite rightly said in her address at the May Chamber lunch, when one commits to being president of an organisation like the Chamber of Commerce, you are borrowing that role for a period, hopefully passing it on in good or better shape. I aim to continue with the hard work and collaborative approach that Jennifer adopted and work even more closely with government, our members and other key industry bodies to overcome the challenges the island faces. I have received many messages congratulating and wishing me luck in the new role from both sides of the water. There was one piece of advice which Jennifer failed to give. Don't answer your phone to a particular member of the other bailiwick. Sadly, I did take the call last week and had to listen to the need for a tunnel between Jersey and Guernsey. What I did learn is the Guernsey tunnel has now been voted number 3 in global tunnel projects to watch by the British Tunnelling Association this year. And did you know only last week there was a World Tunnelling Conference in Denmark? Fascinating. I am told both my predecessors also had this same initiation. Thank you, Jennifer and Ellie, for the warning. Jennifer did allude to one particular challenge in the role as president, that of adopting Murray. This may be a tough call. However, I will face this, as I do with all challenges, with passion and determination. All jokes aside, it has been a privilege in my role of Treasurer of Chamber to work with Murray. His in-depth knowledge, experience, and unfaltering good nature will be a constant support to me in my role as President. As Murray mentioned before, a lot has happened in the last 121 days. We have a new King, a new Prime Minister, a new Cabinet, locally a new States Assembly, a new Council of Ministers, a new Chief Minister, and a new President of Chamber. There are some tough times ahead for the island. We're in a state of high inflation, which is predicted to rise again before it falls. Interest rates are expected to rise again in the coming days. All sectors are facing labour pressures, and relevant to today's lunch, the rising cost of accommodation on the island. Whilst every government must hold themselves accountable, they cannot resolve these situations in isolation. It is imperative that as a chamber, we work collaboratively with government and our members, expanding the productive relationship which we have formed in order to respond to and attempt to overcome the challenges we face. Turning to today's topic, a home is defined as a place where one lives permanently, especially as a member of a family or household. The latest statistics show the average price of a 3-bedroom house in Jersey is £853,000. The average earnings, that's approximately £45,000. This is a multiple of 19 times the average earnings. This is not sustainable, nor is it affordable. I was at the Chamber lunch that the former Treasury Minister denied there was a housing crisis. I think we are right in the middle of one, and I, for one, will be listening intently to today's speakers. Today's event would not take place without the support of our sponsors, and Chamber is very grateful to Ogier for being our lunch sponsor today. Ogier provides practical advice on BVI, Cayman Islands, Guernsey, Irish, Jersey, and Luxembourg law, and Ogier is the only firm to advise on these 6 laws, with a growing team of more than 600 people in network locations including Beijing, Hong Kong, London, Singapore, Shanghai, and Tokyo. On behalf of our sponsor, would you please welcome the Director of Local Legal Services, Helen Ruelle.
Thank Thank you very much. It's really great to see so many people here today. Ogier's delighted to sponsor the event. It was really an opportunity that we couldn't miss to support Chamber, the island and businesses in a discussion about a topic which is so important and pressing for all. No one is immune from the issues surrounding housing. They touch everyone in our local economy. Every single one of us has an interest in one or more capacities, whether that's as a homeowner, a concerned islander, those in the third sector, or those who own or who are running businesses, and of course, our government. And this is why Ogier wanted to play a key role in today's debate. We pride ourselves, notwithstanding what Adam's just said about our international reach, we pride ourselves on our long-standing and committed focus on Jersey and the Channel Islands as a whole, and on actively participating in the debate on topical issues. For all of the members of our local legal services team, the issues which we're here to talk about today go to the heart of all that we do, not just advising on technical legal matters, but supporting our communities and business as they navigate the challenges of the day. So I and my colleagues are really looking forward to what I am sure is going to be a lively debate, from hearing from the panellists and from you all. Many thanks, Chamber, for organising such a topical lunch, and I hope you all enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Before we start lunch, I would also like to welcome today's guests on the President's table. We have Deputy David Warr, the Minister for Housing and Communities, Government of Jersey, and former President Chamber. Lee Henry, Managing Director of the Jersey Development Company. Michael Van Neste, founder of Jersey Homes Trust. And Roger Trower, Chief Executive of Broadlands. They're joined by Paul Boyd, Relationship Director at RBS International. Should be joined by Tim Barnes, our new Treasurer, but he's not here at the moment. And Daphne East, Senior Category Manager at Co-op and new Vice President of Chamber. And Helen, of course, from Ogier. You're all very welcome. And on that note, can I wish you all a very enjoyable lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I trust that you enjoyed lunch. I know some of you are just getting your tables cleared, and coffee is on the way for those that haven't already got it. Neil will make sure you get coffee. It is time for the presentations and indeed our panel for this afternoon. Housing affects everybody, as homeowners, as renters, as employers. It affects recruitment. It has cost implications across the island. So today's subject is very pertinent, very relevant, and your questions to our panel will be most welcome after the presentations. We have the panel, as you know well, but I will introduce them anyway, already seated. We have Michael Van Neste, MBE, the founder of the Jersey Homes Trust. Roger Trower, Chief Executive of Broadlands. David Warr, Deputy David Warr, the Minister for Housing and Communities in the Government of Jersey. And Lee Henry, the Managing Director of the Jersey Development Company. They'll all get 5 minutes for a presentation, and then following all of that, we'll get the Q&A underway. So without further ado, will you please welcome the first of our speakers, Michael Van Neste, MBE.
Good afternoon. I only have 5 minutes, I'm told. I could speak for an hour on this subject without notes, so I'll do my best to comply. Crisis, housing crisis. Do we have a housing crisis? Show of hands, who thinks we have a housing crisis? I think that's about 95%, thank you. Then I don't need to dwell on the fact that we have a crisis. Did you notice in the Evening Post the other evening, we have 70 vacancies of teaching staff? We all know hospitality is struggling for staff. Construction, building trades, it's never been as bad. People are leaving the island, people who've grown up here, who have been educated here, leaving the island because they have no future here because of the cost of housing. This is more than anecdotal, and I'm sure you all understand this very well in your own businesses. We have some pictures to come up. I will run through these pictures as they come up. There's no labelling. These are developments that were undertaken by the Jersey Homes Trust over a period of 20 years. And it gives a lie to the suggestion that development of housing, covers the island in concrete. All these developments that you'll see flashing by during the talk resulted in a vast improvement on what was there before, architecturally, aesthetically, and culturally. When I was in my 20s, I occupied, very fortunately, a house in St. Brelod on an acre site, and I was asked to sign a petition against a development just down the road, 3 minutes walk away, of about 3 acres, which were for about 30 homes. I was asked to sign a petition against that development because it would lower the tone and it would cause traffic problems. I refused to sign that petition. I would hope everybody in this room would have refused to sign that petition in my place. There's a feeling in Jersey, housing development is bad, it sucks in immigrants, it covers the island in concrete. I hope you agree with me that that's all nonsense, and we can develop easily housing in the island. Wrong button. Housing in the island that's not detrimental in any way, but highly beneficial. So we have a housing crisis. Does it matter? As other speakers have said, it affects us all. We are all poorer. I won't go into the moral issues. I'm not here to preach. But we're all financially worse off. Every one of us in this room is financially worse off because of the housing crisis. Every time you go to a lawyer or an architect or a hairdresser or an electrician, you're paying over the odds because you have to pay for them to pay their rents. How are you going to help your children, in my case, grandchildren, afford to buy homes in Jersey? Many of you will, at great cost. All your customers have less money to spend in your businesses. And, of course, at the moment now, we've got severe staff shortages as well. It affects us all. We are all worse off. It is a crisis. Why are we in this mess? Government is supposed to attend to 3 social needs: education, health, and housing. Education, I think, is well catered for. Health has its problems at the moment, as we know. But housing, we have a crisis. And this has been developing for years. We have a housing minister, and I'm glad to see he's present today. What's his job? Why do we have a housing minister at all? The housing department used to look after the state's housing stock and look after housing consents. The housing consents apparatus was transferred to the population office. The housing department management of housing stock was converted into Andium. Thank God for that. Andium are doing, and I see they're here today, a wonderful job, and great credit to them. I'm sure they would like to do an awful lot more, and they should be assisted to do an awful lot more. So why have a housing minister then? What's his role? We have 2 ministers at the moment with housing in their title, and we don't have a ministry. I'm afraid David is very poorly assisted in the staffing of his office. He has someone seconded from maybe Treasury or maybe elsewhere. And what's he to do? How is he going to address this situation? Well, I suggest to him, my time is up.
You've got 30 seconds.
He must make sure, and all the politicians elected were telling us housing was the major issue, they were going to solve it. This is the guy who has to solve it. He has to have strategic objectives, policies and targets. His office is called the Strategic Housing Office. It's not there really to suggest that rents should be controlled. You can have war against landlords, you'll win that war, and landlords will withdraw from the sector, and that'll make the problem worse. So that's not the answer. Soundbites is not the answer. The answer is money, land, political will, open up the gateway to all who want to apply for housing, and here's a thought that, as I leave you, everyone gainfully employed in the island should have the right to rent a property. Now, that's a dramatic statement. But isn't it common sense? Isn't it right? And it's the only way you're going to get 70 teachers, hospitality, construction workers, and everyone else has gone to Europe and they're not coming back.
Michael, thank you very much. Michael van Neste. So you've all got 2 minutes each now. You can have a seat now. No, we won't do that. Ladies and gentlemen, the next of our presenters and joining the panel is the Chief Executive of Broadlands, and that's Roger Trower.
Cheers, Mike. Follow that. Right. You won't be surprised to hear that actually we saw it coming in the office. Excuse me, sorry. That's better. I've got that one. It's all right. I will read what I've written, but hopefully there'll be some decent questions later on, which I will then consult my crystal ball, which is what I've left on the table for all of us. As you're all aware, Jersey's housing market has been on an upward trajectory for a number of years now, and the COVID-19 period seemed to accelerate this with lowest interest rates on offer and finance easily available. The signs of a market change are usually fairly easy to predict. The most obvious is an increase in interest rates. We then see an increase in available stock. This leads to more open viewings, increased marketing, and asking price reductions. It is happening now. My team at Broadlands expected approximately 1,000 properties on the market by the end of 2022. However, we now expect to see that number by the end of this month. As of yesterday, Place's Jersey Property Portal featured 946 properties. This facility is used by most, if not all, of the agents in Jersey and is a pretty accurate number. We think that the peak of the market was early this year and that the cycle has changed already. We are eagerly awaiting the imminent completion of 2 large developments of Building 1 Horizon and Merchant Square, which could possibly bring more stock onto the market. It is fairly standard for schemes of this size to complete, and then the people decide they don't want the apartment anymore. That might also relate to buy-to-lets and a bit against landlords, basically. There's something in there as well. Prices are yet to drop, but we do have to manage expectations. In most cases in Jersey, if the price to a vendor is not attractive enough and they don't have to sell, then they won't, and they will stay where they are. If someone has committed to buy a property off-plan and arranged financing at a high loan-to-value rate, high-value borrowing, and they have to sell, then we have to manage expectations again. Some lessons were learned in the last recession, so that the high loan-to-values are fairly uncommon. It is very rare to find 100% LTVs, but 80 to 90% with decent earning multiples were available at a price. An increase in mortgage rates, coupled with the potential difficulty in arranging a buy-to-let mortgage, will have a significant effect on availability of stock. Cash, once again, becomes king. We've seen it all before, but for some reason, people ignore previous trends and economic data. They assume it keeps rising all the time. For those of you not old enough to remember, there have been serious recessions in the UK in 1980, 81, 1990, 91, and 2008, 2009. The housing market in Jersey survived them all very well, as we had a different restricted market than the UK. Although our housing market stalled, it did not crash like elsewhere. I think we are heading into a recession, and I also think that supply issues on the open market will sort themselves out without government intervention. However, historically, house prices in Jersey have risen by an average of about 5% every year since records began, and this has made property unaffordable for first-time buyers. In 1982, when I started, people moaned that first-time buyer housing at less than £40,000 was unaffordable. And I found an old letter, which I'm going to read to you now. And it was from, I can't say the name because of, but anyway. Jersey housing prices are becoming ludicrous, with one-bedroom flats at £41,000, two-bedroom houses at £52,000, and three-bedroom houses at £68,000. It is no wonder that there is a serious problem. It is time prices were brought under stricter control. With lower prices, perhaps some of the empty houses would be used again, the pressure on the state's list would decrease, and Jersey people could afford to stay in Jersey. That was dated April the 5th, 1985. Frightening, isn't it? The problem has been with us forever. The most recent scheme to provide affordable housing works as the value of the property is calculated on the earnings and the earning ability of the purchasers. For the first time, the states have found a way to do it properly. This is where government can do its bit and work with Andium, the planning department, and local builders to provide the required units. It is not all doom and gloom, believe it or not, Mike. Honestly, it isn't. I will end with a final stat. In September 1990, Mark Bowyer, yeah, that one, prepared a report for the States of Jersey Housing Committee, worth reading and available on Mr. Google, right? It was 36 pages, and one of the stats quoted was that in May 1990, 550 families were on the waiting list for states loan property, plus 300 for single-person units. I understand there are about 200 on the waiting list hoping to purchase at the moment. That was nearly 1,000 then. Here we are 30 years later, talking double that number. I tried to sort of prove that I did read occasionally when I was a child. And I quote from January 1849, I do apologise, 1849, Jean-Baptiste Alphonse Carr, who was a French journalist and critic, and came up with the saying, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you to Roger Trapp. Our next presenter before sitting on the panel is Deputy David Warr. As you already know, he's the Minister for Housing and Communities of the Government of Jersey.
Who apparently has all the answers. So here we go. Good afternoon, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for the invite to today's lunch event, an opportunity to speak. It's hugely energizing to be among so many people so committed to a thriving and successful Jersey. I must start by congratulating Adam Budworth, thank you, on his recent appointment as the Chamber of Commerce new president, and I wish Adam every success in the role. I know what a challenge it is. It's been a whirlwind few months since my election on the 22nd of June. From business owner to deputy of St Helier South even, and now Minister for Housing and Communities. On occasions like these, the term shotgun wedding seems appropriate. When I put myself forward for the job, I spoke about the rising housing costs that are pushing people away from our island, and how those who remain here are finding it increasingly difficult, as our previous speakers have said, to make ends meet. I recognized the issue then as an existential crisis, and my view on that has not changed. In my first few months as minister, I focused on really understanding the problem. I've read more reports on housing than you can shake a stick at. I was memorably given a presentation of over 70 slides of data in an hour on some of the key trends and drivers of the housing market. I and my team have also gone out and met and listened to some of the people who find themselves at the sharp end of making very difficult decisions on housing need. some of which have ended up needing a ministerial decision. That means it lands on my desk. Warr on Tour and Warr's housing wall have become synonymous with my attempts to really get to the heart of the key issues we face in Jersey. What I've learned so far is that our housing challenges are vastly complex. Let's try and find the slider to work. Okay, I hope some of you at the back can see this. We have supply issues, we have affordability issues, and we have housing quality and security of tenure issues. It's a very dynamic environment. These issues are inextricably linked, and in very simple terms, we could say, if we provide more houses, that will help improve affordability, drive up choice in the market, and thus incentivize improvements to quality and security of tenure. If we don't provide more homes, we simply stay stuck in the broken crack of the unaffordability record. But if only life were that simple, I don't believe supply alone is enough to drive the level of change we need to see. We absolutely need to create a market that is fairer, more accessible, and sustainable for not only today's islanders, but for generations to come. Some interventions will inevitably be required to do this, but they must absolutely be the right ones. We also have challenges that to some will be less obvious, but both of which affect the demand for housing. No, a blank slide. Can we move on to that one? Let's do this one. How's that doing? No. Okay, I'll try and explain what I'm trying to show here. The first slide demonstrates, well, it doesn't demonstrate, obviously, has a small decline in the number of people living together in a household. Since 1970 through to today, we've seen a decline of 2.79 to 2.27 individuals in a home. That sounds a tiny amount over 50 years, but the impact on housing has been that's 8,300 more homes required for that tiny change in the way we live. Changing demographics on aging population is having and will increasingly need policies to be developed that reflect changing housing needs. In just a few weeks' time, I'll be formally publishing my ministerial priorities alongside those of my fellow members of the new Council of Ministers. Our Chief Minister has assembled an inspiring team full of energy, drive and passion to get our island back on track. It would not be right for me to lay out my full list of priorities and plan policies here now before their formal publication, and also obviously respecting the death of our monarch. However, I will share with you some of the issues which I'm particularly interested in. Homelessness has and continues to be an issue very important to me. I made it a priority to get out and visit the truly great charities to see and hear for myself the challenges they face working at the sharp end of housing in Jersey and supporting our most vulnerable islanders in their time of need. I'm in awe of the work they do and how they do it with such compassion and respect. I will support them, first taking steps to formalize a definition of homelessness, to create greater visibility of the true level of homelessness in Jersey, which will in turn enable us to provide greater support. And by us, I mean everyone. It needs a whole system approach for which I will be a strong advocate. I've seen the work of our state-owned entities are doing. I want to support them in reaching their potential to do great things for our island, providing more affordable homes, improving our built environment, and importantly, doing this in a way that is financially sustainable and represents the best value for money for islanders. I want to look at eligibility for affordable, subsidized, and discounted homes. I'll be looking to continue to lower the age of eligibility for social rented accommodation. I want to look at the amount of savings people can have, and I want to prepare for an increase in the number of assisted purchases homes. We are expected by widening the criteria too. That's the housing gateway. I also want to look at how both the public and private sector can work together to prioritize homes for local people and, importantly, help young and first-time buyers get themselves onto the property ladder. Meanwhile, I am reintroducing the Rent Control Tribunal to offer private residential tenants a right of appeal if they believe their rent has been increased unfairly. I've listened carefully to feedback about the makeup of the tribunal and am currently advertising for a 5th member to join the panel. I'm particularly keen to hear from islanders who have tenants' rights or consumer affairs backgrounds. A key task, though, of the tribunal is to think about what we should do to modernise the dwelling housing's rent-controlled Jersey law from 1946, making it fit for purpose for the issues being faced today. I'm also working with fellow ministers to better protect and support private rental tenants, whether that is developing proposals aimed at promoting good housing standards or steering through a new residential tenancy law to enhance protections for both tenants and landlords alike. The number of vacant homes is something that really concerns me. Understanding the true extent of the issue is a challenge, and we know the census figures can't be taken as an accurate indicator of the scale of the issue. My main focus is the absolute need to make better use of the homes we already of the homes we already have in the island, and I will be taking action to do this. I do also believe there is a moral imperative on landowners. When land is so scarce, it cannot be right that so many homes remain vacant. We need people to do the right thing for the sake of the community and get these properties back to market. As Minister for Housing and Communities, I'm also particularly interested and excited about the role of modern methods of construction, MMC, can play in housing delivery in Jersey, and I will be looking to support the industry in making a transition to help speed of delivery and better manage sector capacity challenges. I strongly believe that by working collaboratively with yourselves as the Chamber of Commerce, Jersey Construction Council and others, together with the state-owned entities, that between us we have both the power and ability within our hands to tackle the issues faced. Tackling the housing crisis is often about doing the right thing at the right time, not simply actions for action's sake. When the consequences and knock-on effects aren't clear, particularly when interest rates are rising, what is clear is that we need to come up with the good, well-thought-out and long-term solutions. We must balance work on short-term interventions with the need for longer-term change. I'm looking forward to the Q&A afterwards with everybody, but I'd like to leave you with a couple of points. We live in an island with finite land resources. We're 9 by 5, with an obligation to protect our wonderful green countryside, but at the same time supporting the provision of enough housing of the right quality at affordable prices for islanders. That's a huge challenge. The good news is that I've inherited a great team in government and have met many committed, dedicated people who want to help, who are just as passionate about delivering solutions as I am. I'm a realist. There is clearly much work to be done, and step by step, with the help of those in the housing sector and the dedicated team behind me, we will make progress in this administration. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. So to our final presenter before we go to the Q&A, be thinking of your questions already. The Managing Director of the Jersey Development Company is Lee Henry.
Thank you, Murray. Good afternoon, ministers, ladies and gentlemen. As we're all very aware, we've experienced significant increase in property values over the last 3 years. These increases have priced out first-time buyers from the market and made it more expensive to move up. Jersey is not alone in this position. Property markets in all Western countries have experienced significant increases. There are 2 primary reasons for this. Firstly, the quantitative easing programme that central banks enacted to counter the economic impact of the global pandemic. In the UK, an additional £450 billion was printed to stimulate the economy. Secondly, we've experienced a period of the lowest borrowing rates in history, sub 1% over a 13-year period, and rates reduced to 0.1% for the 2-year period of the pandemic. Since the global financial crisis of 2009, the UK inflation has remained constantly around the targeted 2% level. And as a result, we've experienced consistently low interest rates. This position has now been turned on its head, with UK inflation rates at a level not seen in more than 40 years. The primary tool available to central banks to counter the inflation is interest rates. To date this year, these have increased sevenfold from 0.25 to 1.75%, with the market factoring in further rate rises and predictions that we'll be seeing interest rates of more than 3% in the new year. The increased cost of borrowing, coupled with the cost of living crisis, disposable incomes and affordability will continue to be significantly impacted. As we've heard, property in Jersey has always been expensive. However, we've reached new heights on affordability and a growing divide between the haves, the property owners, and the have-nots, the non-property owners. Historically, the Jersey property market has moved in 10-year cycles, as illustrated on the graph. The Jersey property market felt the impact of the 2008-09 global financial crisis in 2011, when the average values did reduce by around 10%. This was the first time since the current records began in 85 that we experienced a reduction in property prices, and a reminder that our property values can go down as well as up. High-level analysis from the released census data suggests that the supply and demand over the past decade has been well matched. However, this is just a moment-in-time snapshot, and as the population figures turned out to be significantly lower than the 2019 forecast of 107,000. Going forward, it's important that supply is maintained in order for demand to be satisfied. And given the delivery lead-in times, property is an imperfect market, and accurately balancing supply and demand is a constant challenge. Jersey Development Company is the government's property regeneration arm, with a focus on mixed-use, mixed-tenure development. To date, we've delivered new residential accommodation and super prime Grade A office space, as well as new areas of public realm. Since incorporation, our average return on original shareholder equity employed has been just over 12% per annum. In the housing market, we deliver open market homes, and over the next decade, we're targeting the delivery of 1,400 new homes. A supply-demand imbalance would continue to push prices out further and result in more islanders needing assistance when purchasing or renting property. The Bridging Island Plan now requires a minimum of 15% of all large residential developments to be shared equity, and we're working with the Minister of Housing and Communities to discuss the criteria for these units. We will also be discussing with our shareholder, the Minister for Treasury and Resources, the level of retained equity and the percentage of units that JDC can deliver as shared equity, whilst recognising that our developments need to be fundable without government support. We also need to recognise the work that Andium Homes are undertaking in the islands as the island's principal social rented landlord in the delivery of new affordable subsidised housing stock. Andium is on track to deliver 3,000 affordable units by 2030. Looking at the actions that can be taken. For the period to the end of 2025, the Bridging Island Plan sets out a target supply of just over 4,000 new units. This is a significant increase in the per annum output at double the 10-year average. Whilst there are a significant number of new developments currently under construction and further approved projects in the immediate pipeline, it's yet to be forecast whether this target will be achieved. Capacity constraints in the construction market are currently being experienced, and going forward, if they persist, will need to be addressed via the importation of overseas labour and/or the introduction of modern methods of construction, MMC. Most large-scale new build development already contain elements of MMC, such as bathroom pods and unitised facades, but this can be taken further to full modular construction to address delivery risk. In partnership with government, we're currently assessing options that are available to us in 3D volumetric modular construction in order to ensure we have greater control over both the cost and certainty of delivery. The States Assembly has also tasked JDC with focusing on owner-occupiers, whether that be first-time buyers or those that want to right size. To date, 35% of JDC's open market units have been purchased by first-time buyers. In 2015, we introduced a deposit payment scheme for first-time buyers that enabled first-time owners to reserve their home off-plan with just a £2,000 down payment, and the balance of their 10% deposit being paid over the course of construction. To date, we've assisted 117 first-time buyers via this scheme, and we're committed to maintaining it into the future. The 2021 census revealed that 44% of owner-occupied homes were under-occupied by 2 or more bedrooms. In the current market, there are limited downsizing options available, and this situation is not helped when downsizers who do manage to find a suitable smaller property may then be discouraged by the costs associated with such a move. To help create movement in the 3 and 4 bedroom housing market, and with the help of the Minister for Housing and Communities, we're developing an incentivised right-sizing scheme to support owners of family homes who wish to downsize. In conclusion, the island is now experiencing high costs of housing relative to earnings. This is making the island unaffordable to would-be first-time buyers and financially unviable for inward migrants that the island relies upon for delivering its key services. The Fiscal Policy Panel has highlighted that the cost of housing is a key issue to be tackled as it's impacting the economy. Maintaining supply and ensuring that demand is matched is essential to ensure that property prices are stabilised. As a result of the cost of living crisis and the significant increase in interest rates, the property market is expected to cool off in the short term, and indeed you've heard it already is from Roger. This is already being experienced in other Western economies, and Jersey is unlikely to be immune. The government and its state-owned entities will be working together to assess other measures that can be introduced to address affordability, such as encouraging right-sizing and the reuse of the current vacant property. Construction capacity and build methods must also be assessed to guarantee the required supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. An interesting opener, but I'm sure you've got questions at this stage, and if you have, now is the time that I'd love you to raise your hand so we could hear from you what you'd like to find out from any of our panellists. Actually, Michael, you were saying housing crisis. Minister, you were saying housing crisis. Lee, you were saying overcoming the housing crisis. Roger, you were saying housing crisis, no housing crisis? What crisis? There's a mic there somewhere. Are you... I mean, you're kind of outnumbered by an awful lot of people here, but you're saying...
I'm sure
there is...
I am, but I usually... Is it on?
Yeah, it's on.
No,
You just might need to hold it a bit closer.
More stock will start to come onto the market. As soon as interest rates start rising, people can't afford to buy certain stuff. The stock will come onto the market. It will sort itself out. It always has done, and it will do so again. But the thing that needs to be...
Just hold the mic a bit closer, and then they won't have to turn it up.
The thing that needs to be addressed is the first-time buyer affordable home scheme. That's what needs to be looked after, because those figures that we're talking there, when we recently sold a first-time buyer's home for just under £1 million. Yeah, exactly. You haven't heard that one. That's not been in the press. The developer actually made it 3 times larger because it was for his own family. And eventually they wanted to sell it on, and we still found a first-time buyer for it. So the market will sort itself out. We need more stock in, but we need stock in the right place. And stock in the right place is at the affordable loan scheme end, because that is a scheme that works, whereas all the other schemes we've had for first-time buyers over the years has been like an open checkbook to those that bought it. So there we are.
Okay, who else wants to come in on that? That's an interesting point. It was almost a round of applause there. Minister,
Yeah.
when it comes to getting the right stock in the right place, you know, as you pointed out, it's 9 miles by 5.
Yeah.
It's a difficult place to find. Have you got locations? Is that right? Is this stock coming online?
Well, you'd be pleased to hear there's Andium table over there somewhere who are very definitely building like Billio. And I think the construction phase at the moment is like nothing before. The problem, and I think Roger is really alluding to here, is trying to get those first-time buyers into the marketplace. And so from a government perspective, it's about building at the moment. I know a lot of people will go, oh, it's crazy, you know, it's all going to write itself out. The reality is, one of the reasons for the island plan, the bridging island plan, was that they identified a need for something like 4,000 new homes on Jersey. They actually identified through all the research. We're not there yet. We haven't built that many homes yet. And as I've said, households themselves are shrinking, so there's more demand for things like one-bedroom flats. People keep criticizing the minister for saying, why are you building more one-bedroom flats, you know? But there's plenty of youngsters who want one-bedroom flats. There's plenty of older folk who want one-bedroom flats. Look at the housing gateway. There is a huge demand. That's where the big demand lies in that area. But these are the affordable homes to which Mike alludes.
I'll come to you in a second, Michael. In terms of directions, we seem to have an upward trajectory of building houses at the moment, which is good news. We also have a census which was less than we thought it was going to be, and as you've all quoted, people are leaving the island. People can't afford to live here. People are going elsewhere. So what happens when we're building houses for people that might not be here? What happens to house prices, first of all? Do you think demand is going to tank at some point? Do you think we're not going to have the people here and we'll have a reducing population? Is that likely to happen?
It's estimated that something like 5,000 people left the island after Brexit and COVID, and they're not coming back because they can work anywhere in Europe if they came from Europe without restriction, go anywhere, they can find somewhere to live. They're not coming back to Jersey. So with respect to you, Roger, we have to build thousands of homes to accommodate the workers that we need in the car industry, car mechanics, construction. I imagine a lot of you understand at the moment, you try and get a decorator or an electrician or a plumber or make a doctor's appointment or appointment with your lawyer, you have a hell of a job. The reason is people have gone. And look at hospitality. Outside every restaurant, we're hiring. And they're desperate. I know a prominent restaurateur. He's working in his kitchen as a kitchen porter because he can't get the staff. It's a desperate situation, and it's not going to be easy to resolve. But what we have to do is build rental accommodation that these people can afford. And it's got to be decent accommodation, and at the moment it's not there. So that is a very critical aspect of this.
Questions? Floor. Hands going up. Excellent. Right, we're out there. We'll get to you as quickly as we can. I'm coming to you, madam. I saw you making notes throughout every one of those speeches there, so I knew that you wanted to ask questions.
Hi, Michael, thank you very much. Could I ask you to add public transport to your list of industries? We, like everyone in this room, are suffering from staff shortages, some of which are caused by accommodation. So I have written a question, hopefully it's not too long. And David's comment about moral imperative as well, please. We, as many others, are facing staff shortages, some of which are due to lack of appropriate and or affordable accommodation. What does the panel think about the multi-tier access to accommodation and the resultant discrimination? And please, it was very focused on buying property. There are lots of tenants in this island. Thank you.
Pick that one up if you want, Michael. You can start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the biggest crisis of all is in the rental section. We don't have enough affordable, decent rental accommodation for the needs of the island. And the gateway is the measure that's used for assessing the housing need, yet the gateway does not allow hundreds, thousands of people to register because they don't meet the very stiff and unfair criteria. Those criteria were thrown away years ago in the UK because they're unjust, they're discriminatory. In Jersey, we hang on and we hang on to a gateway which does not measure the need. And so people have no hope, they're not counted, they don't feel they matter, and they're leaving the island, and they should be able to register with the gateway, even though at the moment the social housing providers may not be able to offer them a home, but at least they'll be counted. And when they are counted, we'll then have government policies that have to reflect the need. At the moment, we don't know what the need is. We think maybe there's a few thousand people that might register with the gateway. We don't know. We absolutely don't know what the need is. And yet people are leaving the island because they can't afford to rent and they can't afford to save up for a deposit.
Okay.
Yeah, that's enough. Sorry.
No, thank you, Michael. I was got the whole table down here nodding.
I guess I better answer that, hadn't I?
And they were almost breaking into applause. So, Minister.
What's the answer? Well, I agree with Michael. One of the big problems is identifying the volume in the market. Now, what we have to be careful with the gateway is that if we open it up too quickly, we inherently create 2-year, 3-year waiting list, which basically means we're not giving any hope to people at all. So what we're currently doing is, there are 3 areas of exploration going on at the moment. One is about age. We've agreed that we're going to reduce the age criteria on the gateway over the coming years. I think it's going to go down to 25. At the moment, it started out at around over 50, okay, at 50 years old. Second point is about the amount of money you have as a resource, in other words, savings. That figure, again, is relatively low. I think it's set about 75,000 at the moment. That, I personally believe, should be significantly higher. So there are lots of things that need to be tweaked. We are reviewing that area, and I agree in principle that what we have to do is we have to open it up gradually without creating a flood into this market, which creates no hope for anybody. The good news is Andim are building lots of homes at the moment, and as those homes are built and come into production, we will be able to house more people, and we will therefore be able to flex the gateway a bit better.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a very quick question. Michael, I'm going to come back to you.
Open up the gateway, Minister. Open it up.
Yeah, I agree. No, absolutely. Open it up. But I'm not saying
Today,
are you saying
today,
are you saying abandoning it? Are you saying abandoning it?
No, open it up to anybody who feels they're not adequately housed.
Okay.
Then you'll know who they are, and you'll give them hope.
Thank you. I'll take
All right.
that back.
There's some good action going on here. Right. You two, I'm glad you're sitting in between, Rog, because you've been a referee in rugby matches, but this might be interesting for you.
What happens to the people that don't have housing qualifications that you need to be able to run the businesses? Haven't we got to find somewhere for them to live? Isn't that the most important thing?
Yeah, but it is.
There's
for
not
businesses
enough lodging
right now.
houses out there. They've all been converted to residential.
Exactly. Anyone gainfully employed should be able to rent. That should be a basic qualification. You shouldn't.
Okay.
You shouldn't
Throw the housing
discriminate.
law. All right.
People.
All
We
right.
mustn't exploit people because they won't come anymore.
Michael, I'll switch your mic off in a minute. Okay.
Can I respond to that?
You can respond to that very quickly.
Very,
I'm
very
going to
quickly.
come back to you.
Okay, there is absolutely a really valid point there. We have this slightly bizarre situation whereby you have 0 to 5 year qualification period for working, where you are dedicated to a particular business, and then after 5 years you are allowed to work for any business at all. However, on the housing side, you cannot buy a house for 10 years, and B, you cannot even rent a place outside of what we call unqualified areas. And I absolutely agree, that is a real barrier, and I think we are very definitely looking at those areas at the
So there's a
moment.
proposition coming to the States then, Minister?
But do it. Do it.
Excellent. Okay. All right.
Isn't government easy when you're not in it?
There's 2 quick questions for you, and I'm going to go to Lee, who's over there waiting for you. The first question is, there's a suggestion from a political party that we know very well, Reform, who said, why don't you just cap rents for a couple of years? Now, on the face of it, people who are renting going, yeah, that seems like a great idea. There's lots of problems with that, though. What are they?
Yeah, I mean, well, lots of different areas. I'll give you one exact, precise example, and that is of an individual maybe who's gone into a care home, and they are relying on the rental income from their home to pay for their care fees.
Right.
Now, those fees are not fixed; they carry on going up. Now, are you going to drive someone who's in a care home into poverty, or have to make alternative arrangements? In that, there's a sort of a scenario which you can have. The other area is on our own housing stock, and that's under Andium. Andium have already kindly frozen rents prior to, at a request of the government. They've also only charged 80% of the market rent as well. Now, if we freeze their rental for the next 2 years, that's millions of pounds worth of rental income they don't get. That means that's millions of pounds that they cannot invest in new housing stock and maintaining the new housing stock. That was exactly the problem which the previous government was having, and not the previous government, a couple of governments ago, when they owned their own housing stock, they simply ran it into the ground.
Okay, there is, and I'm going to come to you, Lee, on the next. There is a set of apartments in town, not the only one, but there are others, and there are others going to be built between Broad Street onwards at the moment, and they're going to be serviced apartments. There's one in town at the moment with 63 one-bedroomed apartments. They're pretty much 98% occupancy, because the businesses are coming in and saying, we've got someone coming in for 3 months, 6 months, 10 months, a year, and they're taking them because they haven't got qualifications, and they're going straight in there. Lee, is there a chance that your development company would look and say, hang on a minute, what we actually need here is serviced accommodation or one-bedroomed, I don't going to say pods, but one-bedroomed accommodation that is specifically for people who are going to be recruited, because half of this room is trying to recruit someone and they can't find anyone locally. So is there an opportunity there to do something like that?
Yes.
Are you doing it?
It's something that is definitely on the radar to be considered and incorporated into future developments. There are a number of models out there in other cities, live-work accommodation, more kind of student-type accommodation with shared facilities.
Halls of residence style.
All of these types reduce the cost of the rent for those occupiers. And I think, looking at there needs to be a complete range of units made available for those essential workers that we need to attract to our shores.
Sure. I remember the golden era of banks used to have bank houses for staff. I think those probably days have gone. Lee, you've got a question. It's on.
Hello? It is on, isn't it?
It's definitely on, yeah.
Lee, you said that we need to build houses, and we do. We need to build. To build houses, we need people to build them. We haven't got the people here to build them. We haven't got the construction workers here. So when we bring the construction workers here from all over the world, where are they going to live?
So we've got a situation at the moment on our Horizon project, for example, where we have a shortage of decorators as a live example. And just this week, the main contractor imported 6 workers from London. Those workers happen to be from Europe, and they're currently housed in various hotels during their stay here. A number of the overseas workers that have specialist subcontractors that have been involved on our projects often stay in secondary hotel accommodation during their periods of stay. Now, that's fine for as long as those secondary hotels remain available, and obviously over time a number of those hotels have been converted and are no longer hotel stock. So it's something that we're very mindful of and need to be looking into for the future to ensure that we still have that accommodation for those overseas workers that come in for periods of time. As referenced in my speech and the Minister's speech, we're also looking at MMC to overcome those capacity constraints. 3D volumetric modular construction is in a place now where it's looking like a valid alternative to the more traditional construction techniques.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm just going to point out that there used to be 16,000, 32,000 hotel beds at one time. There's about 8,000 hotel beds at the moment. Anyone in the tourist industry will tell you that whilst they might be of capacity, that's not enough numbers for them. And if workers for construction are filling hotels, no wonder we can't sell them to tourists. It's just a point. So that's one point that I wanted to make. So maybe we need to, stop damaging one industry with another. Question over at the back.
Hi, thank you very much. I was wondering if the panel would support a change in policy that promoted the delivery of smaller homes, well-designed smaller homes set in shared green spaces. At the moment, a one-bedroom flat has got to be 53 square metres, but people could just as well live in a 38 square metre well-designed apartment, I believe, and at the moment policy really precludes that. I was wondering if the panel could say something positive about that or not.
Can I start?
Of course you can, Michael.
No, I wouldn't be in favour of that. And I think the 55 square metre limitation, that's barely enough. If people are downsizing and they've got possessions, they find it very hard to squeeze into that area as it is. And you say well designed, and I take your point, and you can improve matters with good design, but I would hate to see that as a policy, frankly.
Minister.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting point because I think what Mike, to some extent, is alluding to, and I'm very conscious that there's a certain hotelier who had a long discussion about this, who's trying to develop some properties which are below what Mike has described there as the minimum size standards for staff accommodation, effectively, and trying to build something that's affordable for them. So the question is do we stick with the main policy and then have some kind of amendment to the planning guidelines which enables, facilitates worker accommodation? You've got to be so careful because you're rowing back into smaller accommodation, which is what you're alluding to here. And I think we've got to, if we're going to do that, we have to tie that type of accommodation with employment You know, in other words, with a particular business, or it can't simply slip back into the private sector market where it then becomes someone's home. It has to stay within the area of employment. And I think maybe that's a way around some of this this work.
Roger.
I would agree with that, actually.
Okay, excellent. Roger.
I don't want to upset anybody here, but
Oh, go
quite
on.
honestly, hoteliers, yeah, I know we've lost a number of beds. With my Baudet hat on at Les Ormes, winter lets is marvellous, absolutely marvellous, full of people paying ridiculous amounts of money because they're working in somewhere good over here, earning a good wage. In the end, that's great because it goes through the system and ends up as a charitable donation.
That's worker accommodation, though.
Yes, and a lot of people use what we have up there, which is 5-star self-catering. It's used as worker accommodation during the winter. The problem is that people that owned hotels did not invest in finding places for their staff many, many years ago because they were told how much the staff house they had was going to be worth if it was converted to residential. And I'm sorry, but that's what happens. They took the dollar then, and now suddenly there's a lot of bleating going on saying, I can't find anywhere for my people. Well, sorry, you caused the problem, pal. And
you said you didn't want to upset anyone, but yeah, you're doing a good job so far, Rog.
I was asked for my opinion, and that's my opinion. It's based on fact, actually, because I've seen it happen. I've been doing this for 40 years. I've seen it happen time and time again. And now suddenly we've got nowhere to put staff, and everyone's throwing their hands up in the air, so what should we do? Build some decent, well-designed, purpose-built blocks for people with housing qualifications. It doesn't matter if they're here 2 or 3 years. They never want their housing qualities because of the age that they are or what they're doing. Just get something out there for them to go.
Minister, haven't we now got a form of migration policy that means that they won't get to 5 years anyway? And if you look back at the migration policy recommendations that were written in 2018, I was one of the people that wrote it, that said there should be accommodation for workers and we should start thinking about this 10 years before. So it's kind of been in every document that's been written.
Unfortunately, as you say, it's chickens come home to roost, isn't it? I mean, what you're alluding to here is this 9-month licensing period. In fact, we've actually just...
9 months, 1 year.
9 months, yeah. And we've just brought in somebody from Poland, would you believe it, to cover a position, maternity leave position.
Yep.
So I'm at the sharp end of it from a business perspective and saying this is bonkers, which is the valid point about this 0 to 5 year restriction on people not being able to rent outside unqualified properties. We are reducing the number of unqualified properties because gradually they are falling away going into qualified. Now the danger is, and we're talking to a business community here, but if you go out into the wider island and turn around and say we're going to abolish all unqualified, anybody who comes in to work here can live in, can rent unqualified accommodation, I think you'd have a riot in your hands. Yep. So you'd have to be very careful about how that policy was implemented.
Okay, questions?
Thanks, guys. Look, it's too broad a discussion, right, to get to where we want to get to in the 5 minutes we've got left. But lodging houses, seemingly, to me, are a solution that needs fulfilling. We had when I first came to this island a long time ago, and Roger knows this, there was loads of lodging houses here. That's where people went and worked from. The hospitality, the construction sector, that needs to be filled. Surely the government should be filling that void at the moment, because you can't leave it to the free market practice, because they've actually gone and developed all these and made a lot of money out of them for residential. So if we don't have these workers, this island's quality of life is going to diminish. And then financial sector will start to consider whether they should be here. And then you've got a major crisis on your hand, which is actually going to be a financial crisis for the government and for everyone living here.
I guess I've got to answer that one, haven't I? So here we go. Okay, so in response to that, your point there is, right now we are looking very seriously at what we call key worker accommodation. So this is for nursing staff and various those kind of individuals. And we're working with Andium to see if we can put a policy in place which says we need to provide X number of units for key worker accommodation. So that is a policy under development at this moment in time linking up with our arm's length organisations. So that's one area. I think the other area which is interesting is getting people over here into accommodation that they find acceptable. So in other words, a family. So say we require a doctor or something like that. How do we wrap up? Not just simply give them a decent rate of pay, but also give them some decent accommodation. How do we do that, and what policies can we put in place for that? So those are ongoing discussions as I stand here now, or sit here now. But we're very conscious that the whole market's changed. I think to a point, Roger's point about taking the dollar, quite a few of these places just took the money because the value of these properties went up so much. They just cashed in their chips, and that resulted in a decline in the level of cheap, affordable accommodation. There's also this very quick final point on this, a danger, and this is where about the law and bringing in too much red tape in all of this, is that we scare off landlords. What we need is 25% of the market is private rental sector. That's a really important sector for us as a government. We cannot scare them off. So some of the legislation around there as well, we have to be very careful with in government as well.
Okay, Roger, Lee, just a quick question for you, and I'm going to go to a question from Kevin in just a second. And the question concerns about those who have a mortgage, who have a house. I think the average mortgage is about 460, 470, and those above, those below. I think I'm about right with that. At the moment, there's a lot of people, and the estimate is about 20% of those who've got a mortgage at the moment are on a fixed rate mortgage, which is about to come off the edge of a cliff, because about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a big fashion to do it, and everyone got a fixed rate mortgage. They're going to have an average, on the average price, a £600 a month increase to their mortgage. £5,000 a year, which has got to come from somewhere, which means that's £5,000 they won't be spending elsewhere in the island, and they'll be looking at their employers to give them a wage rise. So are you concerned about those people who are at risk at that mortgage level because the mortgage levels were in large multiples? Are you concerned that you're going to see some defaulting on mortgages?
You might, but we've been through it before. When I bought my first house, mortgage interest rate was 17%, I seem to remember.
It was.
And not so long ago, it was in double figures. No one knew what was going to happen when all the money got printed by various governments, and it went into the economy to try and support the economy during the recession, 2008-9. Then COVID hit. Money's still out there, but it's not with the poor. It's with equity funds and stuff like that. So whether they want to invest it, they want to invest it in property. So there's this no one knew what was going to happen. I don't understand it at all. But I mean, I look at what's going on. A lot of people, if they fixed their mortgage 3 years ago or 5 years ago, they should have taken advice at the time. And if they come and see me, I said, well, it will go up. It has to go up. It can't stay at this rate for this long. And if it gets too much for them, then they'll have to sell. And that's when we get more stock. So it just generates everything. And I get busier.
And you're an estate agent. And Lee, you run a development company. You're all hot. You're digging yourself a big hole, Roger. Lee, any thought on that in terms of that? Because you're helping buyers as well. So, the fixed rates and interest rates will have a concern for you as well.
Yes, and I referenced the impact that this is going to have on affordability and on disposable incomes. I think it's going to be an interesting time for those investors that took a position in the market, particularly those with high LTVs, as to whether the viability on those investments remains in a positive position. They're no doubt, if somebody has overstretched themselves, they are at greater risk than others that may have taken a more cautious position. I think just in terms of responding to some of the conversations around the market, I think we are advocating a range of unit sizes and a mix of tenures available to satisfy all corners.
Okay, final question. We are overrunning. I've got some housekeeping to do right at the end of this. Kevin.
Thank you very much. We'll end on a lighter note. Your president's already kind of poo-pooed this idea, but if you want more supply and you don't want to lose green space, if you worked in a financial centre anywhere else, you would commute in from the outskirts. You'd get on a train or whatever. Why do we have such a difficulty with the idea of a physical link to France? But the value of my house would definitely go down if people could live in France and commute into work, I don't really care, to be honest with you. But why won't we think as big as that? We're too scared.
So you're going to lighten the mood. Right.
Thank
you, Kevin.
It'll cost more than the hospital, that's for sure.
Okay. Can we get a link to France? I tried to get a bridge to Elizabeth Castle. Get one to France. Go on.
As Kevin knows, it's a really interesting question. What was we started up, didn't we, with a tunnel to Guernsey or something? Was that was the one we were talking about?
Yeah, but
yeah, well, thank you.
but yeah, we started off with tunnel to Guernsey, but you've got to have
something. I can't put any houses in it.
It's got to be somewhere you want to live. So I didn't say that. So you know, France, quickly, we're going to run out of time.
I mean, Kevin makes a really valid point. Obviously, it's about supply and demand, isn't it? There's plenty of land over there. Therefore, if you could commute in from France through a tunnel, that'd be great. I dread to think the infrastructure costs, but hey, that, you know, they built the English tunnel, didn't they, between Dover and Calais in the end? So
think of the
never say never.
Think of the toll fees. Right, we are more than I'm so out of time, Mark. I'd love to take your call. There are people who have to get back to the office unbelievably instead of taking the afternoon off. So I'd like to keep going, but I know we can't because we said we finish at 2:30 and we've already bust that one. So will you please thank, I think this conversation will go on, will you please thank all four of our panellists.